Hello everyone, welcome to the second part of the introduction about geophysics and geodynamics. Let's start with the geological timescale. So this nice sketch here shows you the geological periods, starting from 4.6 billion years ago with the Archean until the present. So in between, you have the Proterozoic, Paleozoic, Mesozoic, Cenozoic, and this is the age basically in million years. So this is the past, this is the present, and these are humans here. Let's go around the geological clock. So we will have 12 hours starting from here and going around the clock. So what's happening 4.6 billion years ago back here? It's the Earth formation. So 4.6 billion years ago, we start creating the Earth and accreting all material to build up the Earth. We are there, and if we move up into the pile, we have the Archean times up to 2.5 billion years ago and the Proterozoic up to 542 million years ago. These times, there is not much known until then. We don't have a lot of information of what happened during the first 4 billion years out of 4.6. So that's the equivalent of 10 hours, going from here up to there, 10 hours and a half. So the first 10 hours of the Earth are not very well known. After this, we have the Silurian times. You see the first aquatic life here developed. It's 300 million years ago. It's already 11 hours of the 12 hours until today. Then there is a mass extinction. That's the transition between the Permian and the Triassic, or the Paleozoic and the Mesozoic here. In the Silurian, there's a massive extinction. After this is the Jurassic times, and this is known by most of you thanks to Jurassic Park. During the Jurassic times, we have all the huge reptiles that are living in the forest and that are eating themselves, and that's about 200 million years ago. So 11 hours and 30 minutes on the geological clock here. What happens after this? You know that dinosaurs are not living on the Earth anymore. The transition between the Cretaceous and the Paleocene is another massive extinction, so life disappears from the surface of the Earth between the Mesozoic and the Cenozoic times. Then during the Cenozoic, that's 25 million years ago, more or less. So these are the last 5 minutes of the Earth history until the present. We have development of life again at the surface of the Earth with lots of mammals. And now, late Cenozoic, 11 hours 59 seconds. So the last seconds of the Earth history, we have the first humans appearing. These are from the Lascaux caves. You see the paintings of some of the first humans. They've left their trace. And right now, it's the Anthropocene. We are in the very last seconds. And these are images of our current day world. So the Earth also has a structure. It has a long history and a massive size. The total radius of the Earth from the center of the Earth to the surface is about 6,378 kilometers, and it is composed of different shells. So we have a core inside and shells outside. The inner core is about 1,250 kilometers. The outer core is 2,250 kilometers. The mantle is 2,850 kilometers, and the remaining shell is the crust. So the crust is basically the surface on which we can live. And the thickness of the crust varies between 0 and 60 kilometers. If you look at the crust, you see that some locations are completely blue. So the top of the crust is below the seawater. These are basically oceanic plates. And some regions here are green or yellow. They are above the sea level. These are continental plates. So the plates, they're in direct contact with either the hydrosphere or the atmosphere. And this is where we have ideal conditions for the emergence of life on Earth. So the plates can also be visualized on a map. So we can recognize nowadays geography, and all the lines here are indicating plate boundaries. So you see these are limits of the plates. You have limits in the middle of the oceans. This is where we have the mid-oceanic ridges, for example. And the Earth is dynamic. We know that the plates have been moving. This is plate tectonics. And on this diagram, you see a reconstruction of what we think the Earth was looking like 150 million years ago. So what you're going to see now, we're going to run the movie forward in time. We're going to 150 million years ago to the present day, and you're going to see the opening of the Atlantic. So at 150 million years ago, you see that this is a big continent which has started to open up. So we start opening the North Atlantic already. If we move forward in time, you see that the plates have moved apart, and you see the North Atlantic oceanization. So we are creating an ocean there, and the onset of South Atlantic rifting. About 50 million years ago, you see that the South Atlantic keeps on oceanizing, which means it becomes wider and wider. And that on that side, there's the Indian plate, which is moving towards Asia. They will soon enter into collision. So at 0 million years, current state, you see that India has been piercing through Asia and has been forming a massive collision belt. So the Earth is dynamics, so we talk about geodynamics. The question is, how do we quantify the forces, the motions, and the deformations on Earth? And for this, we're going to talk about geodynamic modeling. So right now we're zooming on India and Asia. So you see here the Tibetan Plateau. This is the location of the highest topography on Earth. And there is a massive thrust front here. So we can study this object. It's one of the most emblematic collision zones on Earth at present. And to study this, you can use quantitative modeling. And there are different ways of doing quantitative modeling. You can use analytics. So analytics, basically, we use the theory. Here it would be the theory of viscous flow in a channel. This would be a section of through the lithosphere here. You would have a topographic plateau, a difference of altitude between the plateau and the Indian lowland. And this model here was used to study how the crust is flowing or deforming inside at depths below the plateau. So you can use analytics for this, and this has to rely on some theory. Here is the theory of viscous flow. You can use laboratory deformation experiments. This is, for example, plasticine. So this is layered plasticine. And here's an indenter. So one pushes an indenter into plasticine, and one can form structures of lateral extractions of block and faulting that basically allows the blocks to break and to escape laterally, forming some of the structure we observe in the India collision zone. Another type of modeling is the numerical modeling. So you see here, again, a section through the India-Asia collision zone. So you would have the lowland on that side, the plateau on that side, and here you see a coloration, you see the different, the crustal blocks here that are entered into collision, and some lower crustal block being extruded to the surface here, close to the collision front. And below here is a temperature model, so it's a prediction of the temperature field associated with this collision here. And this is a computer model, which is based on numerical modeling. The geology is very important because it gives information based on surface observation. So for example, a detailed geological mapping, it allows to reveal the past motions and the deformation of a geological time. So you see here the position of India and 15 million years ago with respect to Asia, and you see the coloring here will indicate different geological provinces. So based on detailed mapping, we have some idea about the kinematics of a system. The geophysics provides method that can probe the internal structures. So we have information about the kinematics based on geology, and we have information about the internal structure thanks to geophysics. So for example, here is again India, Tibet, and there's a cross-section here, and the cross-section is here. And this section shows you variation of the velocity of seismic wave speed. This gives us an indication of how the structure is at depth. So we know the current structure, or we have an idea about, and we know the past surface evolution. And now we need the third tool, and the third tool is the geodynamic modeling, which can unravel the internal dynamics of the system by actually modeling the flow field and the deformation inside below the Earth surface. So the geodynamic modeling, here you see an example of a subduction zone. So you have a plate going down. Below you have a thickened crust with a topographic plateau. So that's Indian plate, and that's the Tibetan plateau. And we can study how fast the plates are moving, how the crust is thickening, and how the topography grows in such a system, for example. So the numerical model, or the geodynamic model, allows to predict all these different fields. Another interesting application of geodynamic modeling is, for example, to study structures of deformation in the rocks. So these are two different types of rocks, which are originally layered rocks. So it means that you have the white horizons and gray horizons. This rock is called a gneiss. And this one is an alternance of limestones and calcite veins. So the limestone is the black material, and the veins are the whitish material, which may originally be flat. And so with using geodynamic modeling, one can try to predict the deformation observed in the field. In both of these cases, you see that layers can sometimes be disrupted by a gliding plane, a discontinuity in the flow here, and these are called shear zones. These are zones where the deformation localizes. And one can model this by, for example, taking a simple viscous multi-layer model. So you have one material here, which is weak, and one material there, which is strong, and you put several layers, and you can impose an extension of these layers. If one does that, at some point, the layers will start necking. Several layers may neck, and all the weak horizons, all the materials between the different layers may connect and start forming shear zones, or zones of intense strain. So with a geodynamic model, one can explore the dynamic evolution of a geological process, and sometimes we can discover unsuspected deformation modes, such as this mechanism of strain localization. One can go further with numerical models, and one may study, for example, in details, the rifting mode. So rifting is the stretching of a lithosphere, which leads to the formation of a basin, such as the Rheingraben in Germany. This is an example of a rifting model, and in a model, you're solving for the mechanical equilibrium, but also for the conservation of energy. So we can predict, for example, the temperature structure. This is a prediction of the geometry. The colors shows you the different material phases. This is basically the crust in orange, and these are sedimentary layers, and the green colors represent the mantle. And on top of this, you see the lines here. These lines are temperature lines. This is the 200-degree isotherms, and this is the 1200-degree isotherms. And this type of structure can be, so we can extract the temperature at all the points, and we may predict how the temperature is distributed at a given location through time, so we can quantify and predict variables such as temperature inside the Earth. To make a geodynamic model, we need to couple several partial differential equations, such as an equation for heat conservation, an equation for momentum conservation, one for mass conservation, and we need closure relationships, which are defining the bulk rheology and the deviatoric rheology. We will discuss a bit more about these equations later in the course. So these are a set of nonlinear coupled partial differential equations. So this requires heavy computing and the development of adequate numerical methods to solve for each of these equations. The good thing is that these equations, they may be applied to the small scale processes. So I showed you a rock scale process earlier, but they can be applied to study the collision zone and subduction zone. So here you have one plate going into subduction below another plate. They are also applied to study convection of the Earth mantle at the global scale. So that's the scale of the Earth. And the same equations are also applied to study the interior dynamics of planetary bodies. So it does not only concern the Earth. So what makes geodynamic models powerful? These are powerful because we can combine paleogeographic, stratigraphic, and metamorphic data, and you can study and predict locally variables such as temperature or strain. So we can compare that to data. We can also model structural observations at the scale of the field and sometimes discover new phenomena of deformation or strain localization in rocks. And we can also work in collaboration with geologists to study what are the conditions that the rock experiment at depth when they are, for example, being subducted in the Earth interior. So the geodynamic models are powerful because they lead to collaboration within Earth scientists from all fields, and they require advanced skills in numerical tools, and also constant development of the numerical tools. So the geodynamic models, they can deliver tests for geodynamic viability or physical viability of an hypothesis. They can unravel internal dynamics of a geological system. They can be used to quantify and predict some phenomena. Sometimes they can be used to discover new processes. And they can be used to study at different scales. So from the small scale, outcrop scale, up to the planetary scale. They rely on geological and geophysical data, collaboration among geoscientists, and for the practical tool you need to know when you do geodynamic modeling is computer simulation and computer visualization. So these are two aspects on which we are going to concentrate in the following lectures. So here's a summary of this part of the introduction. The Earth has a 4.5 billion year old history. It is dynamic. The core, the mantle, and the tectonic plates are in motion. Geodynamics aims at studying the forces and causes of plate motions and deformation in the Earth and planetary bodies. And it relies on theory and computer simulation to deliver quantitative prediction of tectonic processes.